In this lecture, I am going to deal with Samuel Johnson. This is part 2 of the lectures on Samuel Johnson. Now, let's talk about one of the famous work by Samuel Johnson. The name of the work is Lives of the Poets. This Lives of the most eminent English poets that is published in the year 1779 to 81 by Samuel Johnson comprises short biographies and critical appraisals of 52 poets. Most of them lived during 18th century. It is arranged approximately by date of death. 6 of the lives have been singled out as the most important. They are John Milton, John Dryden, Alexander Pope, Joseph Addison, Jonathan Swift, and Thomas Gray. Now, the best of Johnson, this work, his magnum opus, that is that is the meaning of this magnum opus is his masterpiece, that is regarded as the best work of an artist, that is the best work of art by the artist. That is what is magnum opus means. So, the best of Johnson, his magnum opus is his work Lives, published in the year 1779 to 81. Written in the last stage of his life, devoted to criticism and scholarship of the best kind, when he was 68. Boswell calls it the richest, the most beautiful, and indeed most perfect production of Johnson's pen. It is a monument and landmark in the history of the English literature. The Lives of the Poets, in his 3 volumes, in a series of succinct critical biographical sketch, analysis of character, and subjective opinion which make lively reading. Here succinct means that is brief and to the point. Okay, so brief and to the point, succinct critical biographical sketch. A pioneer in the field of biographical criticism, Johnson considered truth, uncompromising truth, to be the aim of biography. He neither praises nor condemns, but displays the minutest details of everyday life of his subject. Johnson was an unrelenting, though honest critic of people and writing. His comments are sometimes lasting, sometimes just historical interest, but never dull. Johnson habitually applies the rules of classical criticism. His interest in the poets as writers is balanced by his interest in them as men, and he was occasionally influenced by political and religious bias. But taken as a whole, the Lives display humanity and an accuracy of judgment, which have ensured them a permanent place in English criticism. Johnson's criticism of poetry is often marred by his prejudices and personal dogmatism. Here, marred means troubled by his prejudices. Prejudices means any preoccupied opinion, and dogmatism means arrogance in stating opinion, or you can say stubborn. Okay, so Johnson's criticism of poetry is often marred by his prejudices and personal dogmatisms. His unawareness of subtler rhythms of the English language and his massive rationality tend to impair the value of Johnson's critical work. Next is poetry. In Life of Milton, he defines poetry as the art of uniting pleasure with the truth by calling imagination to the help of reason. For Johnson, the poet is a creator by virtue of invention and imaginative powers, and evidence of that creative ability is found in the poet's imagery. He regarded blank verse as verse only to the eye. Johnson holds rhyme to be essential for poetry, for it gives pleasure and imparts emphasis. He insists on the use of heroic couplets polished by Pope. Johnson also considers poetry exclusively from its didactic and logical point of view. He wanted to wed poetry to life and use it for moral teaching. He always inquires after the moral of a work of art and pays excessive attention to logical solidity and coherence of its sentiments. In his preface to Shakespeare, Johnson writes, "The end of writing is to instruct, and the end of poetry is to instruct by pleasing. Poetry pleases by exhibiting an idea more graceful to the mind than things themselves afford." So he suggests that the poet should select only beautiful and good things and reject all that is ugly or bad. He criticizes Lycidas, Comus, Donne, and Gray. He finds Lycidas easy, vulgar, and therefore disgusting. Where there is leisure for fiction, there is little grief. He observes that the diction is harsh, the rhymes uncertain, and the numbers unpleasing. He concludes that Lycidas is an insincere expression of poetic grief. Of the songs in Comus, Johnson remarks, they are harsh in their diction and not very musical in their numbers. He is blind to the passionate intensity of Donne and the elevation of Gray. Johnson regards Paradise Lost as the best and the nature's proof of Milton's genius. He praises Milton for the moral which is conveyed in an attractive and surprising narrative. He also analyzes the faults of the epic. First, lack of human interest. Second, presence of unskilled allegory. Third, the truths taught by the poem are neither nor not unexpected. The solemnity of the subject obstructs imagination. Philosophy is confused. It is rather long and tiresome. Next, last one is presentation of pagan gods and mythological gods, and allusions dilute the biblical facts. Next is Johnson as a critic. Johnson's criticism possesses many qualities of lasting value. He is classic and rational, but he constantly appeals to reality and experience. In judgment of literature, he made his main test the appeal to the mind of man. He gave direction to contemporary criticism and paved the way for psychological methods of criticism. He also gave critical precepts such as the importance of the test and time and universality of appeal as ultimate criteria of literary value. He pointed out the necessity of judging a work of art as a whole and the importance of biographical, historical, and comparative methods of forming critical judgment. He had a store of sound scholarship which guided him and determined his judgment. There is a general complaint against him that he lacked the sympathetic imaginative temperament for revealing the finer literary effects. He is also denounced as a rigid moralist and a determined foe of all innovation. He regarded poetry as artful intellectual embroidery, not as the only fit utterance of an exalted mood. Besides his narrow conception of poetry, he had many prejudices. That is, one blade of grass is like another. Hence, it is said that he was not capable of an aesthetic appreciation of nature. Now, let's talk about Dr. Johnson's view on metaphysical poets. In his Life of Cowley, Dr. Johnson writes, "The metaphysical were men of learning, and to show their learning was their whole endeavour. Metaphysical poetry is great labour directed by great abilities, and metaphysical poets are wits rather than poets, because they neither imitate nature nor life. It has more propriety, though less copiousness of sentiment, and is only useful to those who know their value." In this lecture, we discussed Lives of the Poets written by Samuel Johnson, poetry, then we discussed Johnson as a critic and Johnson's view on metaphysical poets. Do the given exercise and submit on time. Thank you.